Well, welcome back. Today I am joined by Congressman Darin LaHood. A lot of things going on in our nation's capital, and always great to have you here and just to talk through a few things in which you're working on and some of the issues that are facing our country. So thank you so much for being here today.
Eugene, thanks for having me on, and it's always good to be with you and your viewers.
Well, the first thing I want to talk about, Vice President Mike Pence was just in New Mexico talking about the USMCA-Canada deal, calling on Congress to pass this deal, saying it will be a great thing for our country. Question is, what's the holdup?
Well, the holdup is the Democrats in the House of Representatives, specifically Speaker Pelosi, has not brought it to the floor yet. This is a good agreement for America. It's a good agreement for agriculture, for manufacturing here in West Central Illinois. I'm a strong supporter of this new trade agreement. Remember, this is NAFTA 2.0. This is taking NAFTA, which of course was passed under Bill Clinton in a Republican Congress back in the 1990s, and we've upgraded it. Remember, 40% of the products we grow, produce, or manufacture in Illinois go to Mexico or Canada, our two biggest trading partners. This trade agreement will be the largest trading agreement ever negotiated by our country, and President Trump and his team did a very good job in doing that. But take the politics out of it and just look at what this means for jobs, economic opportunities, the long-term viability of this country. Remember, we're only 4.5% of the world's population in America. 95% of the markets and customers are outside of the walls and the borders of the U.S. We need trade agreements. This is a very good agreement. And whatever sector you look at, whether it's manufacturing, particularly for Caterpillar or John Deere or ADM, look at agriculture. I have one of the largest ag districts in the country, corn and soybeans, ethanol. You look at financial services, State Farm Insurance in Bloomington Normal. Look at technology. All of these things, this agreement helps all of those sectors benefit. So when we get back in September, we need to bring this to the floor and get it passed. Unfortunately, politics has seeped into this, partisanship. A lot of the Democrats don't want to give the president a win or a perceived win. This is a win for America. It's a win for jobs. So I'm hopeful, and I'm going to be working with my Democrat colleagues, Republican colleagues, to get this across the finish line.
All right, well, talking about your district, farmers, soybeans, ethanol, you mentioned that we're still in the midst of a trade war with China. This is obviously switching gears a bit. You've been on the show before at the very beginning saying that you believe that we did need to stand up to China and their ethics and the way in which they go about business. But also at the beginning you were saying you didn't want it dragged out, but now you kind of saw that the practices were working. If I'm kind of paraphrasing what you said, your progression over the months or year. But how much longer can our farmers here take as far as us being in this trade back and forth with China?
Well, we're in a very tough situation right now with China. There's a lot of anxiety in our ag community, a lot of uneasiness because of the trade war with China. Think about it, 25% of our soybeans that we grow here in West Central Illinois have gone to China every single year. It's a huge market. That market has been zapped up because of the trade war. But on the other hand, China's been ripping us off for 25 years, stealing our technology, our intellectual property, forced technology transfers. We're trying to stop that behavior. And so I give President Trump credit for that. But I am not a fan of tariffs. Tariffs are taxes. They're taxes on consumers. They're taxes on farmers. They're taxes on manufacturers. And I worry about the long-term consequences to our farmers. Farmers have stuck with the president generally on this, but we cannot be in a trade war a year from now or 2 years from now. And I've stressed to the president, his trade team, sooner rather than later we need to resolve this trade war.
So is that what you would say as far as the absolute cutoff time where you would switch your tone a year from now would be where you would say, okay, at this point, I don't care what has happened, how much progress we're making with China and their practices, we need to cut this off. Is that what you're saying, a year from now?
Well, we're about 90% there with China right now. The last 10% is the toughest part, and that's really what we've been going back and forth with on. I think in the next 3 to 6 months, I think you have to resolve that. We've seen some contracting in our economy already because of the trade war and how that hurts. I mean, we've had a very strong economy over the last 3 years, but if trade goes south, that could hurt our economy, and China's a direct result of that. So my recommendation, what I've said is, again, the next 3 to 6 months, let's get this resolved, because our farmers are the collateral damage in this trade war. Our manufacturers are the collateral damage. We need to have a good trade agreement with China. So sooner rather than later, we need to get it resolved.
And you mentioned the economy. There's this R word that right now, mumblings of R word, looking for it, and I'm talking about recession. And there's been some kind of contradicting comments back and forth, going back and forth within the White House between the president and the White House administration, and the president going back saying, hey, we're looking at some things and maybe possibly planning for a recession, then saying, no, there's no recession, economy is good. And that's been a strong point of this administration, the economy, you know, and the growth for that moment. But when we're talking about a recession, do you think we are in for one? And if the economy is strong, why these questions now?
Well, I don't see the signs of a recession. As I just mentioned, I think trade is one area that we have to be concerned about. That could precipitate a recession. I think that's why we need to resolve this issue with China and get the USMCA passed. But let's look at the numbers. Lowest unemployment we've had in 50 years, 3.7%. And all sectors of unemployment. Lowest unemployment in the Hispanic community, lowest unemployment with women, lowest unemployment in the African American community. We have a strong economy that is premised on prosperity, people doing well. Frankly, the number one thing I hear as I travel around my district the month of August, we don't have enough skilled labor. We don't have enough truck drivers. We don't have enough welders. We don't have enough machinists, technicians, construction workers, nurses. So the economy is strong. Do we always got to be concerned long term? Of course, we got to look out for the economy. But I don't see the signs of that. I see a strong economy continuing to move forward. The other thing that I'm always conscious of is federal spending. We're $22 trillion in debt. I've been critical of this administration that we continue to go in debt. We can't continue to max out the credit card on our kids and our grandkids. I voted against the budget bill at the end of July against my Republican leadership because we further went into debt. We got to be concerned about that. And again, that affects the economy long term as it relates to going into debt.
You have recently been quoted as saying that you do plan on running for re-election in 2020. I haven't had the chance to ask you to yourself, so yes, that is true?
It is true.
All right. So with you going into re-election for the seat that you're in right now, what would you say have been your wins? What would you say for voters who are considering re-electing you, why they should do so?
Well, listen, I've been honored to have the support of my 710,000 constituents in Central and West Central Illinois. It has been humbling. It's been an honor to represent them in Washington, D.C. And when I look at the last 4 years that I've been fortunate enough to serve in that job, coming in on a special election, I think obviously the tax cut bill that we passed and what it's done for the economy, putting more money in the pockets of folks, right? If people look at their retirement programs or 529s, we've done, I think, an awful good job on the economy with the tax cut bill, giving more of their hard-earned money back to them. I think we put a real focus on our ag economy, right? Making sure, remember, ag is the #1 industry in the state of Illinois. It's the #1 industry in my district. Working with my farmers on trade issues, working with them on regulatory issues, working with them on expanding markets. We've done an awful lot on that. Plus, we've put a real focus on good constituent service. When you call up our office, whether you're a veteran, whether you're a senior citizen, whether you're a small business owner, you're going to get the best service possible. And we've tried to reflect the values in Washington, D.C. of people in my district, voting the right way, being there for our district, and then being a cheerleader for the district, going to Washington, D.C., whether it's on infrastructure, whether it's on manufacturing, whether it's on agriculture, whether it's on education, being an advocate, being a cheerleader for our district. And again, I'm honored to have that support. Look forward to running for re-election again. And we have many challenges ahead. Infrastructure, we got to do more on that. Passed a federal infrastructure bill that will help our roads and our bridges and the locks and dams on the Illinois and Mississippi River. We still have a long way to go on trade, as I just mentioned on that. So, and workforce development is another big topic we have to work on. So those are things that are challenges as we move forward. I look forward, if I'm fortunate enough, to have the support of the voters a year from November to continue to do that.
Well, with your re-election campaign, I'm starting to think more about the census. I've talked to several state legislators, and the census coming up obviously in 2020. There's a lot of concern or people predicting that Illinois is going to lose, a seat in the U.S. House. And looking at our districts here within the 17th and the 18th, for you, do you predict that happening just because of population decline within the state of Illinois? And what kind of impact would that have, not just on you, but on the district as a whole, if we were to lose a seat?
Well, I think we'll see with the census coming out, but I would tell you this, we are going to lose one for sure because of our population loss and the growth of southern states. We have 18 members of Congress currently in the state of Illinois. We'll probably lose one. We could lose two, and it's unfortunate, Eugene, we continue to hemorrhage people out of the state of Illinois because of a not very good business climate, because of public corruption over the last few years. and the opportunity for people to go elsewhere. But it's very important that January, when that census begins, that we count all voters and all citizens in the state of Illinois so that we don't lose 2 seats, right? And how does that impact Illinois? Well, not having as many representatives, you lose a little bit of your clout. You're not going to have as many opportunities in D.C. long term. So the census is going to be important. Our office will be encouraging people and doing all we can to get people counted so that we can minimize the impact of the census moving forward.
Do you specifically think the 17th and the 18th are in jeopardy if we were to lose 1 or 2 seats?
I think that's too early to tell. Obviously, the state legislature will draw the new map after they get the census. So I think it's too premature at this point to look at that.
All right. I want to kind of bring light to something that the president said earlier this week. There's right now a little bit of controversy surrounding these comments that he made regarding Jewish Americans and their voting choices. I'm just going to read the quote, part of the quote that he had on Wednesday, saying, "In my opinion, if you vote for a Democrat, you're being disloyal to Jewish people and you're being very disloyal to Israel. And only weak people would say anything other than that," end quote. What are your thoughts about the president's comments? Do you agree with his sentiments? And a question that I have with that is, if I'm a Jewish American, why must I be loyal to Israel? It's almost as if the common talking point is if I'm anti-Israel, I'm anti-American.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't think you're going to find a stronger president supporting Israel than President Donald Trump. Moving the embassy in Jerusalem, the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, was a big deal. Presidents for 25 years have talked about this. So this president has done a very good job in supporting Israel. Remember, Israel's our only ally, our democratic ally in the Middle East. We have a strong bond with them. We got to continue that bond. And so this president has gone out of his way to continue that. The language he used there, I'm not sure the context of that. That's probably not language I would use. But again, the facts and evidence speak for on their own. This is a president that's been extremely supportive of Israel. And I know I had a couple of my colleagues that went over there last week, and there was some controversy with that. But these are 2 members that have supported the BDS movement, which is a movement that goes after Israel. And I know that caused a lot of controversy. But we continue to be a strong ally with Israel. I look forward to continuing that support. I know this president has premised a lot of his reelection on support for Israel, and I think it's a strong one.
All right, just one, you said not knowing the context. It is, I guess, kind of hard to say against the context, because the words that he used are fairly strong there. I mean, saying that if you are a Democrat and you're Jewish and you vote Democrat, you're disloyal to Jewish people, but it's pretty strong language there, even with given the context or not.
Yeah, that's probably, again, language that I wouldn't use, but I know that the president feels very strongly on his support for Israel. He's visited Israel a couple times, and he's going to continue to speak out. This is an unconventional president, and he speaks his mind.
All right, you've given me a lot of your time. I have one more question for you. And bringing it back to the state of Illinois, something in which you just spoke to the president about, at least reportedly, and that's about his comments alluding that he was considering pardoning the sentence for former Governor Rod Blagojevich. You've been reported as saying that you called the president, spoke to him about your opposition to that kind of thought or idea. I guess my question to you is, what did you tell the president, and what message would that send if Blagojevich was pardoned? And last portion to that question, I know it's kind of a three-parted one here, is I know the president likes to say that no one controls him. He does what he wants to do in that moment. Do you see as though this is something like he's going to let it go, or the pardoning of Blagojevich is inevitable?
Well, I did have an opportunity to speak to the president on this issue. I'm a former federal prosecutor. I served in the state legislature. I followed what happened with Rod Blagojevich and his removal from office by Democrats. Of course, he was impeached, and then his federal trial that happened where he was convicted for fraud, extortion, and bribery. I think it's a bad idea to issue clemency to Rod Blagojevich. But I premise that and what I told the president, and I'm just one person that weighed in on this. There's lots of others that
several Illinois Republicans who
felt strongly about this. But remember, 4 of our last 8 governors have gone to federal prison for public corruption. And not one of them have ever been granted clemency or had a pardon. That's the first thing. Second thing is, most of the time when you're convicted, particularly of public corruption, there's an apology, there's remorsefulness, you're admitting what you did wrong. Never once has Rod Blagojevich ever admitted what he did wrong. Thirdly, Rod Blagojevich got the low end of the federal sentencing guidelines by the federal judge in Chicago. I reminded the president of that. Everything that Rod Blagojevich engaged in is what we're trying to stop in the state of Illinois. I think it's a terrible idea to give him clemency for somebody that, again, has not admitted what he did was wrong. I weighed in, a lot of others. But one thing about this president, he is a listener. He takes in all points of view. He clearly has the authority to issue clemency or a pardon. And so I think he'll make that decision. I thought it was important as one member of Congress from Illinois to weigh in on this. And the last point that I would make is you look at the conduct that Rod Blagojevich engaged in, pervasive, extensive, the damage he did to state government and to this state as a whole. I think it's something that to reward him with clemency or to let him out with that type of behavior, I think is the wrong approach. You look at those bribery and the fraud convictions, shaking down a children's hospital executive for $50,000 or you're not going to get your funding. Shaking down the racetrack owner. Again, these are all recordings, $50,000. The pay-to-play politics that we have tried to change in this state, again, that's something that he did and has never apologized for. So myself and many others felt strongly. And by the way, Governor Pritzker, Democrat, thinks Rod Blagojevich ought to stay where he's at. And Lori Lightfoot, the new Democrat mayor of Chicago, agrees with my position also.
All right, and just to kind of come back on it, still, do you think the president will listen and follow suit, or do you think that it's still possible that he will pardon Rod Blagojevich?
Listen, I think it's still on the table. I think it's a fluid situation. We'll have to wait and see what decision he makes.
All right. As always, Congressman Darin LaHood, thank you so much for joining us and giving us the insight on what's going on in Washington.
Thank you, Eugene.